Yeah, so it's been a bit too long since I've done any content about the Big O on this channel, which is a shame, given that it's my favorite anime series, and since it is my birthday today when I'm uploading this, you guys are just gonna have to be okay with me talking about the Batman meets Giant Robots anime again. Cool? Cool. Anyway, I think we all know the drill. It's time to take 5 characters from the Big O and give them teams of 4 Pokemon apiece, as I once again tell you what I think it'd be like if the Big O characters were Pokemon trainers. And as always, big time heckin' spoilers ahead! Let's start things off with someone that some of you were actually quite disappointed wasn't included the last time I did a what if about the Big O, a proud officer of Paradigm City's military police, Major Dan Dastun. Voiced by Peter Lurry, Dan Dastun is dedicated, above all else, to protecting Paradigm City and her citizens, and to prove the worth of the military police. These motivations often cause him to butt heads with the show's protagonist, Roger Smith, since the latter often has to use Big O to combat the many giant robots and monsters that threaten the city's safety, which causes Dastun to become annoyed and frustrated at best, and disillusioned about the worth of the military police as the city's protectors at worst. It certainly doesn't help that he also struggles with the notion that the military police are ultimately just watchdogs for the Paradigm Corporation, something he absolutely does not want he and his fellow officers to be reduced to. In fact, there's been times where Dastun has gone out of his way to disobey orders from Paradigm that dictate that he only engage in actions that would only protect the city's wealthy citizens inside the domes, or allow harm to befall the city's less fortunate citizens. In the end, Dan Dastun is not a bystander, and he is nobody's lapdog, and he'll do whatever it takes to protect the city that he loves, and everyone who lives in it. To start off Dastun's Pokemon team, let's give him a Gumshoos, a Pokemon whose name and visual design takes cues from old-school gumshoe detectives, a reference to Dastun's staunch and steadfast commitment to preserving justice and upholding the law. Plus, there was at least one time in the show where he actually just straight up looked like an old school PI. Next up, let's go with an Arcanine, whose evolutionary line is quite often used by the various police officer trainers throughout the Pokemon franchise, not to mention that it gets the ability Intimidate, a great reference to how Dastun can very much come across as an intimidating presence to the lower ranking officers in his command. After that, I'm gonna give him a Gallade, whose Pokedex entries all sing the praises of its chivalry and honor, and its willingness to help those in need, much like how Dastun just wants to prove that he and the military police can effectively protect Paradigm City without constantly having to rely on Big O to come in and clean up their mess. And lastly, and admittedly this is just an aesthetic pick here, but I'm gonna go with a Probopass because, I mean, come on, I gotta give Dastun props for that mustache-sideburns combo. Seriously, the only thing stronger than Dastun's commitment to justice is his commitment to that facial hair. And you know what? I respect it. Next up, let's take a look at a character who was only in a single episode, Eugene Grant. Only appearing in Act 8, Missing Cat, as voiced by Tom Fawn, Eugene is a geneticist who had been working with artificial proteins, leading to experiments meant to bioengineer pets like dogs and cats, which have become incredibly rare in the last 40 years. However, his more recent experiments had even his benefactors at the Paradigm Corporation scared of him, as he started to claim that he had obtained the keys to life itself and started performing reckless experiments where he turned human beings into, well, whatever the hell these things are. Eugene will gladly stoop as low as to do things like use one of his defective test subjects to murder an old business partner, or kidnap a couple's son to use as raw genetic material, and then gun down said parents in cold blood, all to achieve his twisted, delusional goal of becoming the so-called creator of a new world. Now, since Eugene is all about genetic manipulation and splicing various creatures together, I thought it'd be an interesting theme for his team to be all Pokemon that are technically multiple Pokemon put together, but that are considered one single species. So, bearing that in mind, to start things off, let's give him a Metagross, a combination of 2 Metang, each of which themselves is a combination of 2 Beldum, a Pokemon with the intellect of a supercomputer, representing the sort of intelligence it would obviously take to become a geneticist. After that, we'll go with a Magnezone, a Pokemon whose evolution from Magneton, a Pokemon composed of 3 Magnemite coming together as one being, was caused by a special magnetic magnetic field, something that scientists have apparently tried and failed to replicate artificially. Magnezone could also be a pretty fitting choice for its ability Magnet Pull, which prevents opposing Steel-type Pokemon from escaping, much like how Eugene wasn't above kidnapping and abduction to further his goals. Next up, I'm going to give him a Galarian Slowbro, Slowbro being the combination of Shelter and Slowpoke, and I'm going with the Galarian variant here because, unlike with the standard Slowbro, the Shelter is clamped on the Slowbro's arm and acts like an arm cannon, which could represent how Eugene wasn't above using firearms and heavy artillery to make sure that his plans went smoothly. And finally, I have got to give Eugene a Silvally, a wholly artificial Pokemon who was created using stitched together pieces of various other creatures, which is a perfect reference to the Chimera, a creature that Eugene created using dozens, if not hundreds, of other beings, including Pero, the titular missing cat from Act 8 that Dorothy found hiding from the rain, who it turns out was actually a cat genetically engineered from a human boy named Roy. It also perfectly represents Eugene's god complex, because, if you remember from Pokemon Sun and Moon, Silvally's entire reason for being was to act as a genetic facsimile of the Pokemon world's god, Arceus, hence the similarity in body shape, as well as Silvally's ability, RKS system, you know, RKS, as in Arceus, being designed to be a one-for-one copy of Arceus' multi-type ability. Eugene Grant clearly saw himself as a godlike creator, and Silvally, a Pokemon meant to allow mortals to wield the power of God in the palm of their hands, is a perfect Pokemon for someone with such high and mighty aspirations. So, Eugene, how'd that whole playing God thing work out for you? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say, not well. And now it's time to talk about one of the most dangerous and cunning people in Paradigm City, Alan Gabriel. Voiced by Crispin Freeman, Alan Gabriel was first introduced at the end of Act 14, Roger the Wanderer, being teased as a new henchman for the show's main villain, Alex Rosewater, making his presence felt just one episode later when he assassinates an old senator before he could hand over precious and valuable memories about Paradigm City to Roger Smith, a half-man, half-machine who attacks with deadly speed and a vicious bloodlust. Alan would go on to become a major obstacle for Roger and his allies in later episodes, displaying a cruel and sadistic malice, seeming to take a perverse pleasure in the idea of tearing apart people and androids alike. Alan was also an agent working for the Union, a group of foreign operatives seeking to control the memories of Paradigm City, but ultimately Alan's only true loyalty is to his own murderous desires, only really pledging his allegiance to whatever entity gives him the chance to cause the most mayhem. To start off Alan's Pokemon team, let's give him a Scizor, a Pokemon that becomes a Steel type once the more organic Scyther dons the Metal coat, much like how Alan Gabriel, at some point in his life, decided to quit being a total human and become something more akin to a cyborg. Also, Scizor's Pokedex entry in Ultra Moon states that it'll beat an enemy with its pincers until there's nothing left, much like how Alan claims that he sadistically enjoys tearing apart androids piece by piece as he murders them. Speaking of which, I think a Bisharp with its blade-like arms would be a perfect representation of Alan's ability to turn his hands into the sharp, deadly weapons that he prefers using for his killing sprees. After that, we'll give Alan a Gengar, who's detailed in the Pokedex as this horrifying urban legend that can sneak through shadows and steal your soul, which could be a reference to how, when Dorothy asked him if he was man or machine, Alan simply replied that he was the Boogeyman. And lastly, we'll round out his team with a Spiritomb, a Pokemon comprised of 108 wicked souls that was so evil that its misdeeds got it sealed away into the Odd Keystone, a perfect reference for Alan's cruel, violent, sadistic, and utterly evil nature, which drove him to play double agent between the Paradigm Corporation and the Union, with his only true loyalty being to whoever let him kill the most people to satiate his endless bloodlust. Of course, it's that same lust for violence that ultimately drove him to let himself be hooked up to the systems of Big Duo Inferno, which ultimately served as his downfall, as Big Duo ended up rejecting Alan as a Dominus and killed him. I don't know about you, but I think Spiritomb being sealed into the Odd Keystone for 500 years doesn't seem so bad in comparison. But now let's take a step back for a second and talk about a character who doesn't get a lot of screen time in the Big O, but is still pretty fascinating, our Instro. Voiced by Kirk Thornton, he's most prominently featured in Act 6, A Legacy of Amadeus, which I actually did a whole video about not too long ago, being introduced as someone quite similar to our Dorothy Wainwright, a musically inclined android built by an old scientist who wished to fill the void left behind by a beloved child that they lost, but whose design and circuitry also unfortunately lent themselves to far more destructive things. But despite the disillusionment that our Instro feels about one of his father's more dangerous inventions, and the manipulations of the world's most obvious villain, Gisang, our Instro ultimately resolves to dedicate his life to the art that he loves, the art of the piano, which, in a place like Paradigm City, is actually pretty admirable. To start off our Instro's Pokemon team, let's give him an Oranguru, whose signature move, Instruct, which allows a partner Pokemon to use a recently used move once again in succession, would be a great nod to the fact that our Instro agrees to become our Dorothy's piano teacher, which is mostly an arrangement made just so Dorothy's loud, robotic piano playing doesn't keep waking Roger up so early. After that, our Instro's next two Pokemon will both be references to Constans, the Megaduce created by Instro's father, AMADEUS. First of all, Exploud, who attacks foes using sound waves strong enough to cause earthquakes, a perfect reference to the phonosonic wave attack that Constance uses, which Big O had absolutely no answer for. And then, Chargerbug, a Pokemon that both resembles and functions like a large battery, and even has a signature ability called Battery, a reference to how our Instro piloting Constance actually involved him plugging his arms into a control panel that permanently locked his hands into it, the apparent only way for him to remove them being for him to forcibly rip them out, destroying his father's unique circuitry in the process. And lastly, I'm gonna give our Instro a Kricketune, a music-themed Pokemon that's a perfect reference for how our Instro was only convinced to stop using Constans to wreak havoc on Paradigm City because of his love of playing the piano, something that both he and his father loved dearly. Although I'd like to think that Kricketune's cry would also be a pretty good way to bring Instro back to his senses. Ugh, so good! And last, but most certainly not least, it's the big bad of the Big O, the Paradigm Corporation's chief executive, and the would-be god of the new world, Alex Rosewater. Voiced by Michael Forrest, Alex Rosewater is the son of Gordon Rosewater, the mysterious founder of Paradigm City, and thus holds a massive superiority complex. He's more or less the absolute ruler of Paradigm City, considering that, according to Roger in Act 4, the Paradigm Corporation is both church and state within the city, but Alex's unquenchable lust for power won't let him be satisfied with that, and he has loftier ambitions outside of the borders of the city of Amnesia. He views the poor, downtrodden citizens of Paradigm who don't live in the fancy, highly protected domes to be a nuisance and an eyesore, so much to the point where he's almost thankful for a lot of the destruction that befalls the city, at least in the outer portions, even telling the military police at one point to delay bringing down a Megaduce running rampant just so it can wipe out some of the half-destroyed buildings outside of the domes first. If Schwarzwald is meant to be Roger's equal and opposite force, Alex Rosewater is likely meant to be a twisted funhouse mirror reflection of Roger, a vision of what Roger could be if he had allowed his ego and his ability to pilot a big Megaduce to run unchecked. Alex typically wears a white suit in stark contrast to the all-black suit of Roger, and while he too tries to maintain a calm, controlled demeanor and handle things in a business-like manner, he's far less capable of keeping his cool under pressure, prone to angry outbursts when things don't go his way, with Vera Ronstadt even going so far as to describe him as a spoiled child. Probably not helped by the fact that he literally has a remote-controlled toy version of his own Megaduce. And much like any overprivileged child, Alex Rosewater wholeheartedly believes that not only can he turn the world his father created into one of his own making and preference, but that he's entitled to do so, viewing himself as the god of a new world, and even what's superior to that of his father, and willing to wipe out anyone and everyone that he deems unworthy of that new world. To start off Alex's Pokemon team, I've got to give him an Alolan Persian. Not even just because its Pokedex entries note its massive ego and arrogance, which is perfect for a man who quite literally views himself as the son of a god, but also just because, even when I was a kid, Alex Rosewater's style and demeanor did always kind of remind me of Giovanni, the boss of Team Rocket, so it's kind of like Alex Rosewater is Giovanni's regional variant or something. Next up, let's give him a Sableye, representative of Alex's vast wealth, demonstrated by his attempts to buy the silence of former Paradigm Press reporter Michael Zabok, despite the fact that the latter doesn't seem too interested in how many zeros Alex can put on a check. After that, we'll give him a Honchkrow, a Pokemon classified in the Pokedex as the Big Boss Pokemon, perfect for a man who's essentially in charge of Paradigm City and everything in it. In addition, Honchkrow's Pokedex entries detail how it won't forgive the failures and mistakes of its subordinates. Though admittedly that's a bit ironic for someone who is more than willing to make a deal with the Union to have them deliver the parts for his Megadeus, only to turn around and have the military police hunt down and arrest any and all Union operatives within the city. Oh, and, you know, the fact that Alex tried to kill his own father by burning his entire farm down just because he wouldn't hand over his memories. And lastly, we're gonna give him a Melmetal, and specifically one capable of G-maxing, to represent Big Fow, the big Megadeus that Alex is eventually able to pilot with full control. And I say eventually because, you know, the first time he tried to pilot it, the thing shut down on him entirely, and he had to have Jason Beck steal Dorothy's memory drive so he could rig Big Fow with a core memory to control it completely. Melmetal's impressive physical bulk could represent how Big Fow was able to shrug off most of Big O's attacks during Roger and Alex's fight, not to mention that not only having a legendary Pokemon, but one that's specifically also a mythical Pokemon, is perfect for someone who quite literally believes himself to be the son of God, the one true Dominus, and the only man capable, nay, worthy, of reshaping the world into his own image. I mean, unless, you know, you account for the reveal that Alex was actually one of the many genetically farmed children used by Gordon to try and artificially cultivate memories, but hey, let's not let a silly little thing like facts get in the way of a good messianic complex, right? But now I want to hear from you. What Pokemon do you think these characters from the Big O would have on their teams? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more in the future, share this on your favorite social medias, and ring the bell so you always get notified when I upload. No, but like seriously though, not to play this card twice in one video, but it is my birthday, so you know, it'd be really nice if you could help the video succeed. Thank you. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.